here we go. But it arose, as in our directors meeting, we were lamenting that it seems that sometimes people look at academic life and think about, oh, how stressful it must be. But I think a lot of us think academic life is awesome. And so we wanted to, at least give a chance to discuss that perspective as well. And so, Dani, I'm just so grateful that you're willing to do this, and we'll turn it over to you without further ado.
Awesome. It's fun to be here. Before I get going, I'll just add my congratulations to Emily and also remind you all that she was a TA for our 60-person online course that had never been taught online before this term in the middle of when she got married, and did it so gracefully and was so, like, it just couldn't have happened without her help. So super woman in full effect. So thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you, Dani.
Okay, I will share my screen. So, when we chatted about this and in the leadership and we talked about doing it, I wasn't really sure what this would even, what I would put together and entail. And I'm not sure that I got it right. So I'm curious your feedback, but I thought I would just start by, soliciting input from you guys first, and then we will kind of partner it with what I would say about myself. Because I think, this relishing academic life, I think it starts by just thinking about, what do you value? So if you guys are all thinking about, and I'm gonna ask you two things. I'm gonna ask you, what do you value in a career? And what do you value in work life? And those are sometimes the same, but they're sometimes different, right? So I first just wanna hear from some of you, and I'm gonna open it back up into non-presenter mode so I can type in things I hear. Like, what are you guys, when you think about your career, and like I said, separately I'll ask about work life itself, but what are some of the things that you value?
Dani, you want us to put it on chat, or you just want us to?
No, holler it out. There's not that many of us. Holler it out. I'm going to type it in.
Freedom to pursue my own ideas, express my creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Meaningful work that hopefully makes a difference.
I'd say flexibility for being able to attend Halloween parades at preschool and that type of thing.
These are great. Any others?
Just opportunities for growth.
Okay. I think that you guys have had a sneak peek. What I think is going on.
Yeah. I was going to add, I love having great collaborators. I think that, working with people who are both intellectually and personally great just enriches a career life a lot.
And also teaching, like pass on knowledge.
Is that what you mean, Chinli?
Yes.
And lifelong learning, Dani. That's
that's okay. Now I gotta go back down.
I think you learn so much from your colleagues and students, and then you learn otherwise,
Mm-hmm. All right, we feel good about that? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd also add, opportunities for service. So teaching is one of them, but I think there's other ways that we get to do something meaningful for others.
I think that's great.
Now, Dani, were you hoping for, the students and fellows also to weigh in?
Yes, and I can't see everyone when I'm in presenter mode. So if you guys have a better gallery view, please call on folks who haven't spoken.
I'm just reacting to the fact that most of that seemed to be coming from the faculty.
Others, don't be shy. I know some of you don't know me as well, so maybe you're not speaking out. You can also, if you prefer, in the chat. If you don't want to holler, you're welcome to use the chat.
I guess variety, like being able to do a lot of different things.
Great. Mm-hmm.
would also
Great.
add to work in the interdisciplinary team, like to collaborate with people from different fields, different research topics.
Is that a fair summary, Karen?
Yes.
Great. So I think it's important to think through these because, you know, for many of us, these are kind of obvious, but we don't name them, right? We don't lay them out and then kind of hold up to the light whether or not these things that we say we value are actually our experience in our current career or in the one that we're looking for when we're looking for jobs. So, you know, I think the fact of just naming this and thinking through it is a really critical exercise for you guys as students to do as you're thinking about jobs and careers, but also for all of us, you know, who've already made a choice to be thinking about. And I'll ask, thanks, Pat, I'm going to add that in there. Brian, would you mind being the chat monitor to make sure that I don't miss something that someone says?
Absolutely. And I don't know if you caught, Pat just put a chat in there about doing something you truly enjoy doing.
Yeah. That was what I wanted you to think about first. And I joked that I think you guys are cheating because here's my quick list just last night. Opportunity, interesting and diverse work, get a choice of what I want to do, get to advance, flexibility, and then all these different, you know, teaching, research, mentoring, collaboration. So it's basically the list you guys gave. So sounds like we're all kind of in this together. Let me ask you a related but not exactly the same question. And that is, oh, right here. Don't cheat by looking at mine. Where is it? I'll just delete my list because I think that just never got deleted. How about what you value in work life? You guys know what I'm asking that's slightly different? Okay, I get some head nods. Who wants to holler that out?
Maybe an ability to maintain boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'd put flexibility of schedule.
Uh-huh. I'm going to expand my view a little bit so I can potentially see other people so I can help to call on folks.
I'd say maybe being in a culture where having a life outside work is appreciated and celebrated.
I would say also like being in an environment that is like as supportive as possible, in a place that like actively aims to sort of like de-stress environments as much as possible, as much as possible.
Any other types of support you mean? Like what do you guys think
I
of
like
as
that. Also like a collegial environment.
And supporting diversity in people and diversity in their thinking, like different thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Maybe not, that one doesn't need to be under this umbrella of supportive though, right? Or of,
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a broad thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Others. I can see a few people leaning in, but I haven't seen any unmuting. Again, you can use the chat if you're more comfortable with that, and Brian will let me know. I'll just prompt you a little bit while you guys are doing that. Environment that is supportive, you said like a sort of wellness environment and collegial environment. I have heard folks that also think about a work-life environment that is supportive of your enrichment or your like career enrichment, professional enrichment?
I think also supportive of like personal choices or like different priorities.
Great. And so, I put this one in as they're related but slightly different because, I mean, when you think about what you're envisioning as your career, right? You could have the same career, but very different work-life circumstances in that career. And so I think it's important to first think through, what does it mean to thrive in your career? Because that may be more some of the things that you guys talked about flexibility of ideas and, opportunity to do, teach and do research and this. And whereas work life to me is, once I've decided those things, am I doing it in a way that I feel like I can thrive? So these kinds of things of supportive environment, appreciation of a culture that, respects. So I loved Karen's point about culture that appreciates life outside of work. When I did graduate school in, well, I shouldn't name where I went, but because I'm about to say that it was the con of the pro that I'm about to say, but in graduate school, no one talked about vacation. Like none of the faculty members that I was around would ever mention like, where are you going this summer? Or, oh, I took Monday off so that I could do this. It was very much this ethos of, oh, I work more than you do. And we all, work our hearts off and we only sleep like 2 hours a day and we never go on vacation. We never do this, And the first time I got to Hopkins, even when I was interviewing, people asked me, oh, because I think I must have been interviewing in like August or something. And people asked me, oh, did you go anywhere this summer? What do you do when you go on vacation? Like, like it was really that's part of your life and that's supposed to be something you do. And it was shocking to me. Like now it's weird to me that wouldn't be normal. But back then it was remarkably out of the blue to me because I was not used to a culture where that was acknowledged. Okay, so quickly, my list when I was, again, these were not long thought out ones, but overlapping still, I think with you guys quite a bit. My work life, I want people I enjoy working with. I wanted the flexibility and the choice of work content and of schedule. And you guys mentioned that. A place where I feel valued, a place where I feel both short-term and long-term gratification. So that there are, like for me, teaching is often a more short-term gratification in that like from the beginning of a term to the end of the term, I get to see growth, like real growth, new knowledge, new thinking, certainly over a whole year of a cohort or a whole 4 years of a doctoral student, I see this like amazing, gratification. The research that I do is not always as instant in its gratification, right? In some sense, some things are important, but incremental. And so it takes longer to see the full impact on society, if you will, of some of those things. So I kind of like that I have found a career and a work life where I get both of those things. So that could have gone in career, I guess. And then I think it's okay to say financial stability. Like one of the things I want in a career and in work life is that I'm not worried about where my rent's going to come from or how I'm going to get paid or those kinds of things. And then lastly, ability to travel, something where I get the opportunity to do those things. Right now, I think we all would love that ability to travel, but definitely in the kind of what I think of as a work environment that I like, it's that. So probably others too, but I just, again, wanted you guys to think through some of those. And if you'll bear with me, oh no, let's not, before we do that, I wanted to do the reverse then. I want to hear from you guys. So those are all kind of yay, rah, rah, this is what I want out of career and work life. And then I kind of gave you my value system around that. And hopefully I'm articulating a bit that I feel like I am getting that out of both my career and my actual work life here at Hopkins. But I want to hear what your concerns are. There obviously is a yin and a yang to this perspective. And so I really would love to hear some of your own personal concerns or even commonly cited concerns or negatives that you've heard of around academic life.
This is a really tough one, Dani.
Because you've never heard anything negative?
I don't have any concerns. It's too much fun. That's the only concern.
I think boundaries are tough with email and, you know, nighttime requests for things like, you know, speed networking and things like that when you have young kids, especially at home. Sometimes, and you're working at home now 24/7. So I think boundaries can be tough. And I don't think that's a result of Hopkins. I just think that is how life is right now.
Am I reflecting this right, Jen?
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to turn off, but I think that responsibility lies with us as much as with, you know, the institution we work with. But I do think it is hard to turn it off sometimes.
Others? And come on, students, this is where it's awkward, and you might want to put it in chat if you don't want to put it, because I think what happens is you guys are often afraid to cite these things because you know that those faculty on this call have chosen this particular thing, and that you feel like it's, you know, somehow, you know, insulting to us. That is not the case at all. It's not like we are unaware of some of the perceived negatives, but I think it's important to hear your actual concerns.
I feel like in like the yardstick or the metric by which success is measured, or things like promotions are based on, is, in at least from my perspective, seemingly not always directly correlated to like the quality of one's work in terms of like publication numbers and publication in high impact journals. You don't have sort of, not always a direct correlation to quality.
Is that a fair summary, Emma? What I wrote?
Yeah.
Dani, there's also a comment in the chat about hearing about lower salaries in academia compared to industry or government careers.
I'd like to second what, goodness, why am I like skipping, or I'm like losing names. Emma, I'm sorry, second what Emma said, and add to that, like this, yeah, there's like a pace and kind of this competition like feel sometimes too, which is interesting. And I'm not sure how that I fit into all that.
Pace or frenzy of an academic life is kind of what you're thinking.
Yes.
And I heard competitiveness too. I think that's an important concern. I would throw out just plain stress, you know, I mean, we've all known people in academia who've experienced pretty severe stresses in conjunction with their career growth. And I often hear this from students, is worry about the stress.
I think this is related to a lot of,
I'm sorry, we had to say funding, right? What we do is so tied to availability of funding. I think that has to be up there.
I was going to say too, I think this is just restating what's been said by several others in ahead, but just sometimes the expectations aren't clear, right? And the expectations can feel very different for different people, or you as a person might feel like the expectations put on you are different than for others.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was trying to capture that, Jen, in the opaque or unfair, but I think it's good to reiterate what you're getting at. Others?
I think for me, it's a little bit difficult to set up a short-term and long-term goals. So I became a postdoctoral fellow from PhD student. So like during PhD student, I feel like the dissertation is the most important thing, and you have to achieve that finally. But after defending my dissertation, I feel like it's a little bit difficult to set up my long-term goal. Like in the future, what is my ultimate goal in my research career?
Is that a fair way to phrase it?
Yeah.
Great.
Personal growth is really hard. Like it's exciting and reward. I think it's rewarding, but it's you know, those transformative processes are painful and difficult, and they take a lot of support to get through, and a lot of coaching and strength, and yeah, they're tough.
And are you thinking that in the context of this point of the setting your own short and long-term goals, or are you thinking that as a separate concept under academic life?
Separate. It's related. Setting goals is really hard, but yeah, no, I think a separate point.
I don't know if I'm going to articulate this well, but I think also like geographic availability of opportunities, and sort of the idea that you're going to like drop everything and pick up and move to like the place where the best postdoc position is, and sort of like given like where the big universities are, that's what your like big life choices are going to be focused on, or like the place where the best faculty position opening is.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an important one for lots of folks.
I have one that might be a bit difficult to articulate as well. I sometimes worry that there's a still uncommon but present type of personality that might be more common in academia than elsewhere, that can be kind of difficult to work with. Something that, like, if you were to go to a small company, you could probably find a company that where you could avoid this type of personality altogether, but I think is definitely present to some degree in most academic institutions.
So you haven't said what that difficult personality is. I can try to give you some common, so that you don't have to use the words. I can give you some common ones that I think come up. So an ethos of ego-driven.
I think maybe hypercritical might be in there too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I also think, and this is, I don't know if this is more for faculty or if this is for students too, but part of our job is doing things we never had training in. You know, I never learned how to be a teacher, but I teach a lot of students, and I never learned how to mentor. I just learned by, you know, observing. So there's just a big part of our life where we don't get training in what we're supposed to be doing.
Although, as I recall, one of our friends on this call said that's one of the desired aspects to a career.
Exactly, lifelong learning.
See, I love this though, because this is the point. These are very personal questions in terms of what characterizes your own concerns versus values. Any more?
Well, and I think it's also, I don't know, it's very different. Learning as you go about a content area is very different for me. And that's exciting versus learn how to, a new skill to do a job. That may not be quite so as exciting. But.
How about that, Jen? Is that a fair?
Yep, that's perfect. Mm-hmm.
I'll add one.
Yep.
I think as a student, and not so much now, but I was concerned about how reliant career mentorship was in academia life, and choosing the right mentor and who to be under and build my career that I wanted to build. That was a huge concern for me to stay in academia. Everything's gravy now. I know Jen's here.
But your point is really that there could be heavy influences, right? Whether they be good or bad, the idea that a mentorship relationship could be so influential.
Yeah, and if it's not great, that would probably kick me out of academia. I wouldn't want to be in it anymore.
Fair. There was a chat that just popped up. Brian, is that something I should know about?
Just an affirmation of Amal's humor.
That goes back to working with people you like to work with.
I think it has to be the right fit, right? You know, I've had mentors who I've fit well with and some who I haven't fit well with. And so I think, you know, that's really important to consider for sure.
Along those
Slightly.
lines.
Oh, go ahead.
Karen.
Go ahead, Emily.
Okay, I was just going to say along those lines, like power dynamics. And I mean, I think that exists in any workplace, but just like if you're in a place where you feel like you don't have sufficient mentorship, or like if the teacher or professor of a course isn't doing well, like sometimes you don't feel like you can say anything.
Is that fair, Emily, as a reflection
Yes,
of your
yes.
thought? All right, so my intention in this one was to not tell any of us that we're wrong. I should say when I first entered, like some things I was worried about was too much work, no play. I was worried about pyramid promotion strategies. I was worried about some of the things that you guys already mentioned, like the geography restrictions. Particularly because at the time that I was looking, I had a partner who was at a national lab, and you know, that was, you know, you have to figure those things out. But for all kinds of reasons, you may have family or other things where you want to be in certain places. And then my point to do this one was to say, none of us are wrong in our concerns, and some of these hold true as limitations to academic life. But I would like to posit that many of them are either solvable or are not unique to academic life. And so we hold them up as like real concerns of, you know, I don't want to do this because I'm going to pick on Jen because she's a faculty member. Actually, there's two. I'm going to pick on Jennifer Deal because she's a faculty member. That there are too many things where you're kind of thrown to the wolves to learn as you go, to teach a course or to write a different grant or whatever it might be. But if you talk to somebody who works for like Ernst & Young, they would tell you the same thing. They're put on a project that's due in 2 weeks where now they're like designing, you know, a new accounting system, and their degree is in geography. Like, it really does happen that way for a lot of folks. So I would posit that it's an uncomfortable feeling, but maybe not specific to academics. Anybody want to push back on that posit? So,
I'll absolutely agree with it. I worked between undergraduate and my master's. I worked for 5 years in corporate finance. So I worked for PNC Bank in corporate financing in Philadelphia, and then I worked for a real estate firm out in Michigan, and it was completely inflexible. This was in the 1990s. I'm dating myself. Women were treated very, very differently than men. When I first worked at the bank, we couldn't even wear pants. We had to wear a suit, and it had to be a skirt. So it's definitely, you know, that way in other industries as well, for sure.
anybody else want to pick a different bullet on here and sort of, you know, express thoughts that might be that it's either not unique to academics or something that we can change or is possible to not exist in certain environments, certain academic environments?
The funding one is pretty specific to certain academic institutions, right? Not all, but.
Yeah, I think that's right. But, you know, like Hopkins, we live and breathe the kind of extreme of that model, right? Many of our peers, people we went to graduate school with, live in different academic settings. They still get a lot of the positives that we talked about in terms of career and work life, but they are, say, you know, only expected to bring in 40% of their salary from grants or things like that. They are expected to do a lot more teaching, you know, so there are these different models of how that could work where the soft money funding isn't as stressful. I would say though that folks that, you know, you have to find where you feel that you thrive most in that. And there are folks who love this kind of model because although it's a little bit of a pressure point stress-wise, it can also be quite exciting because you get to try new things and push the envelope in ways that you don't get to do in other kinds of settings. So there's, in this one, to me, there's no right or wrong. It is not a character flaw if you say that is not the way I want to live my life. It is being pretty self-aware. It's also pretty self-aware to realize that you really get jazzed about living your life that way.
I'll speak briefly to the boundaries one. You know, some of you have heard me talk about my own struggle with boundaries early in my career. And, you know, I think, but I do believe that this is more a function of places, individual places, rather than academic life versus other settings. It can happen, a setting that's hard to maintain boundaries can happen in any career. And, you know, I guess part of it is, at least for me, there was a lot of self-learning involved in terms of setting boundaries. And once that happened, I found that I could do it to a degree that was acceptable, you know. So I don't mean to minimize it. I think a lot of people share that concern. But I would contend that it's a feature, you know, of a combination of one's own personality and certain settings rather than the academic life writ large.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we find across, I think that's right, Karen, you kind of, that one is one of these that's both. It's not specific to academics and it is solvable, may not be the right word, but it is manageable, right? And you see all kinds of self-help and coaching and book, you know, other kinds of books or podcasts or tapes that talk about boundary setting and time management, which I think is enough testimony that this is something that we all struggle with across different kinds of careers. And it's getting harder because there's the constant, there are so many ways to contact each other now that I think it's more and more difficult. Jen, were you going to say something?
It is, yeah, sorry. It is interesting, Dani, and I totally hear your point. Like, a lot of these things are not unique, but I do wonder about some of these and whether or not an academic life just doesn't have the ability or propensity to kind of exacerbate these compared to some others. I mean, the boundaries is one I think is real, in addition to like the power imbalance with mentors or, you know, whoever your chair is. And of course, that's across the board, right, for a lot of different careers. But I do think in academia, depending on where you are, and again, Karen, to your point, depending on a lot of different personality mixes, I don't know, you can end up in a space that's not a good space with that regard.
I think it's true. I think in that sense, though, you have some locus of control, and you also have a locus of control in choosing a place that has a culture that it can handle that better than others. Right?
Yep.
I think one of the other ones I just wanted to touch on, because you guys said it, and I actually said it in things that I value, was financial stability. And somebody wrote, you know, lower salaries compared to industry or government. I think that somewhat depends on discipline. I'm not here to tell you that that as a biostatistician, you're always going to get the highest paid job by becoming an assistant professor somewhere. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think in some other areas that we do in aging and in the School of Public Health, they're much more on par in terms of what you would get in a non-academic position versus an academic position. And I think we don't always do a great job of sharing, you know, what the financial remuneration is. I think, you know, this is an awkward one because I'm a chair. So like that, you know, and Karen's a chair. So we actually make salary decisions. So we are not the most objective exactly on this issue. But I will say, you know, a faculty position is not a poorly paid position. I mean, you can have a stable financial career doing this. That is not true everywhere, but it is certainly true in some places. And so I don't think that the knee-jerk response that, oh, that will always be the least lucrative option I have is necessarily true. It might be true, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I don't know if others want to speak to that. And then when you balance that with other kinds of benefits and matches to your value system, you know, it may not be as far off as I tended to think when I first started looking.
I don't think there's that much of imbalance, and maybe it depends on the exact job or institute, at least within the government, because I've looked at positions in the government that actually pay less. So, you know, I mean, that's not necessarily true.
And having tuition benefits is a huge plus for academia.
Yeah, did you guys hear Chinley having tuition benefits? I think that's what you said, Chinley. Is it
Yes.
huge? Yeah. Yeah, and I think these are things we just don't talk about with you guys as students as much as we should. You know, the ranges of salaries at different ranks and different kinds of tracks, the benefits that we get, both in terms of health benefits, retirement benefits, particularly at Hopkins, are really good. The tuition benefit that Chinley is talking about is extraordinary. It's 50% of college tuition for each of your children, and if both spouse or both partners, parents, have employment at Hopkins, you get the 100%. Each one of you counts your 50%, and that's for any college, up to 50% of what Hopkins tuition would be. And since Hopkins tuition is amongst the highest, it basically means 50% at any institution. So that, if you think about that, Hopkins, what was it this past year? 58,000, something like that in tuition. So half of that a year is a pretty good thing, right? Now, that's not the only thing, but that's what he was getting at. You know, I think the health benefits and particularly the matching of retirement benefits is pretty good compared to most other places. And these are just things that we don't really talk about. So I just wanted to highlight that you guys had brought that up, but also I had said it when I was thinking through. It's one of those weird and awkward things that you don't think to ask your advisor, right? All right, anybody want to talk through any of these other bullets where we can kind of shape an opinion or help to either alleviate the concern or validate the concern, come up with strategies to cope through it? You guys reading or?
What exactly is the bullet? Too much work, no play.
That was my bullet. So I was really worried, and I some days worry, but I was really worried when I first became an academic that I would work all the time and not take time to play. And so like a good example that did come to fruition is I happen to be a big football fan, and I will never, ever forget sitting in my 6th floor Wolf Street office on a Sunday when it was snowing, and there was this amazing AFC championship game going on in the snow, and there I was writing a grant in my office at like 6 p.m. on a weekend. And I remember thinking to myself, this is exactly what I was worried was going to happen to me. What I can tell you is that is not most of my life, but there are, so one of the things that I'll talk about in a minute is the ebbs and flows of this career. Is there are times where I am so in the weeds and I feel like the heaviness on work versus play or whatever you guys call, you know, non-work time, is tipped too far in one direction. Frankly, there are times where it tips too far in the other direction too. I mean, that, you know, that's, for me, that's how it goes. But I was worried that it would always be in that one direction. And I think there are a lot of people who worry about that, oh, if I choose that career, I'm never going to get to, you know, go do these other things because I will always be working on weekends and I will always be working at nights and that kind of stuff.
Now,
Did your grant get funded?
Yes, I think that grant did get funded. I think that was one of the original seeds. I'm writing the renewal right now and I'm back in that weeds mode right now. So I'm a little bit more grumpy than normal, but yes. Karen, were you going to say something?
Just the very brief version. I mean, I did begin my career that way, you know, feeling like I had to work all the time. And ultimately my mental health suffered. And so I had to change my ways. And I found out that after embracing a more balanced life, that I actually was more productive than I had been before anyway. So I don't mean to be glib about it because it's serious stuff, but I would just endorse those who say that there are ways to manage it, you know, and both work and play.
Yeah. So I'll just spend a couple of minutes, if you guys will indulge me, telling you, you know, just some examples from my own experience about why I think it is a fantastic career and what I've gotten out of it. And it's by no ways a summary, but I'll go back to presentation mode. So the first thing, when we talked about those values, many of you said, you know, you get that you'd want to be doing interesting and diverse things, work with people with lots of different disciplines, do lots of different ideas. I don't only work in autism, but this was a slide I just pulled from an autism talk where I talked about how important it is to have all these different kinds of disciplines to come together to make real change. So I thought it was just a good example of this point, that that's one of the things that I love about this career is the ability to interact with people who have diverse sets of expertise and perspectives. And that's true forever. It's been true for the 20-something years I've been doing this, and I don't think it's going to stop. The other you guys mentioned is people. I can't tell you how much I love the people I work with. Like, it's just amazing. And one of the things in academics is, it is true, you don't get to choose everyone you work with, but compared to a lot of other careers, you do get a bit of flexibility in this. You know, you decide who you want to repeatedly write papers with, or who you want to repeatedly write new grants with, or, you know, I mean, there is a lot of flexibility. Now, it's not 100%. It's not saying you don't have to work with people that you find difficult, but you don't have to work with people you find difficult as much as you might in other places. And, you know, I often get the opportunity to find just amazing people. I just can't say enough about how much I adore the people I get to work with. I love there's really no bucket that's separate: teaching, research, mentoring, collaboration. They kind of all blend together in an academic life. I love it. I am one of those dorky people that actually loves poster sessions. I love to walk around. I love to hear what people are doing. I love to see them convinced. This is, some of you know Calliope, who is my doctoral student. This is her convincing a sort of, you know, somewhat senior and well-known person in the field of the work that she was doing. And he started out kind of skeptical, and then I was sort of on the back watching, and it's like so fun to watch her like make her argument, and like it was beautiful. And then we do a lot of eating. There's a lot of I like to eat, and so there's a lot of great food going on. It's fun to watch students get awards. It's fun to celebrate with people. There's a lot of celebrating in an academic life. And I don't mean this trivially, it's really true. Graduations are super fun. Everyone is happy at graduation. Like, that is just a moment, and it's every year. It just happens over and over. And people get awards, and they, you know, are recognized for what they do. And that happens over and over. Like, these are really fun things to get to celebrate with people. Somebody mentioned flexibility of schedule. For me, that has been huge. I like to run. So things like running races on a Sunday, or sometimes races are even during the week, and then not coming into work on Monday. Like, I don't have to ask anybody for permission to not do that. If I'm not teaching or have some really important meeting, I can just do that. It's great. You can see a little picture of a Valentine's Day party back in the day. I can show up in the middle of the day to my kids' Valentine's Day party. You know, it's not even a huge event, but I can do it. Or I can chaperone a trip to the zoo, right? Those are all privileges that I have.
You're retired?
Speaking of, my son just came in and said, "Wait, Mommy, you're retiring?" I also have the privilege of flexibility schedule to travel. So I had to leave in the middle of a work week when it was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, because they live in Florida. That was amazing. My mom turned 80 last November. I could leave in the middle of the week to go and help plan for her birthday party and host her birthday party. So those are all privileges that a schedule like ours allows, that is not true for other folks who have a much more defined work week. I mentioned travel. I can't even tell you, like, because of work, I sometimes go to a place for work and then see my college friends, like that Denver one, or the picture on the top left was American I can't even say it, APBA, American Psychopathology Association, in March, right before everything shut down. That's a restaurant in New York City on March 9th, I think. So that was literally the last time I went out to dinner, but it was so fun. And then you can see on the right, I had a study in Denmark, and we went to these really wild dunes, and to the tip of Denmark has 2 seas that come together. So like, these are just really remarkable, cool things. And in the bottom, I think you guys recognize, is the Great Wall of China. And then because of that, this is Vancouver, I got to go and be on a student's defense. Like, other universities ask outsiders to come and be part of their defense process. And when I did that, we went to Seattle, and I got to bring my kids places. And like, you know, these are all just, you know, fun things. So I just say that to say, I put you what my answers are, and then I gave you a little bit of evidence of why I thought it's so cool. And when people ask me, you know, about all the concerns of academic life, I don't, as Karen said, I don't ever want to invalidate those, because they are real, and there are challenges, and there are things that we have to learn to cope with, or that we just live with, or that we change, right? But we should also talk about all the positives. I don't think we do our own career service by not telling each other and reminding each other of all the great things that are opportunities. And so this is my little, like, sage advice from Dani or whatever. It's a little weird to say it this way, but when I was thinking about, what has worked for me, being thankful, naming it when there are these good things, I guess is what I mean by practice gratitude. This work hard, play hard. I still play pretty hard, but I try to work as hard as I do that. Amplify the good and let go of the bad. That I think we spend a lot of time perseverating on the bad and the challenging things of our career, and not as much time talking about the good or the awesome parts of our career. The ebb and flow I mentioned before, it's not like there aren't huge peaks and really deep troughs. They just exist, right? For me, I create a yay folder every time somebody sends me a sweet note or congratulates or just, says, thank you for saying that. That really helped me. I put it in a folder so that when I'm having tough times with this life, I read those and I remember why I do it. And then we talked about the boundaries. And I think it is important for all of us to set boundaries. This is a tough one for me because I find myself, I can't just set boundaries for everything, right? We still got to get things done. So if we're going to set boundaries, we have to deliver within the lanes that we have declared. And so, I'm a constant work in progress on that one, and probably we all are. But that has been helpful, is to then focus and be in flow in those times when you have set your boundaries rather than unsetting them. And this was to Karen's point before, is turned out when she gave herself space for other things, she actually could be more effective in those times where you were, in the lane. So, and then the last thing, if you'll bear with me, we got a pandemic puppy. So you can sometimes feel like this with all of academic life. And I just want to remind you that you can also stop and smell the flowers. You can also play, and you can also be with people you love. So I'll unshare.
Dani, thank you so much, first of all. I'm going to personally thank you because I thought that was really wonderful.
Oh, good.
And it looks like we have a few minutes if anybody would like to raise anything. I think we can all reiterate, certainly as faculty, that we hope you'll come to us, when you have questions, when you're thinking through these kinds of things. And, I know we don't mean to push, down your throats, that, oh, this is the only career path and you should do it. But just to, in this session, embrace it. It can be a wonderful life. And then more generally, just to be helpful and help think through when it comes to it, whatever it is that you lean towards deciding you want to pursue.
Here. And I think Karen's last point is a really good one. It is a little awkward. Like I said, we've all chosen this career. And I remember even as a graduate student, I felt so awkward to ask piercing questions about the negatives of it when I know that somebody's chosen that, that's just a never ending concern, but step over that line if you can, because honestly, we have thick skins and we're here because we want to help you thrive. And you getting to those first questions, what does it mean to have a career and to have a great work life? What for you is thriving? Then we will give you whatever information we have or connections we have to help you to meet that, But I will.
I don't know.
This is one of the ways to thrive.
Yeah. I don't know if this is really a question, but I guess maybe would add that I think one of the things that feels like almost daunting to me is that I feel like I've been told that there are some, you make some choices, it's harder to change your mind or come back from them. If you go away from academia, it's harder to get back into it or things like that. And without having experienced it or really knowing, you can hear other people's experiences, but I feel like a lot of the messages that were reiterated was it depends on where you are and who you're working with. And there's all these other factors. I feel like that kind of makes it scary in some ways to pick and then not feel like it would be hard to change my mind.
Yeah, Emma, I can say real quick, I think that's one of the most common feelings and important articulation of it. I felt that way too. I think this movement from graduate school to postdoc to your first faculty position, or if you don't do a postdoc or you do something besides faculty, like those few decision-making points, people feel is all or nothing. Like there really is this existential feeling around it for everyone. You're choosing a place to live, you're choosing what kind of career you have. To the extent possible, to remind yourself that you can move from that this is not a deterministic decision from which you can never, pivot. That it's just not true. It feels true, but it's not true. And I think more and more, especially in public health, but probably in other areas too, the value that people bring from doing practice or doing other kinds of experiences, if they then choose to do academics, is real. People have been hired at associate professor or things like that when they had come from a non-academic setting, particularly if it's government or practice sector. And the reverse happens too. So I don't think it's irreversible. I really don't. And I think it's even more so not now than it was 20 years ago when I was experiencing what you're experiencing. But this is the most common thing I hear from my own advisees at this moment in time. And I can see why. I felt it too.
Dani, thank you so much. This was a fantastic session. And yeah, we should do more of these. Everyone, please enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll look forward to seeing you the next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye, everybody.